It's the meeting between the Los Angeles Rams and the New Orleans Saints, two teams desperately trying to cling to life in the worst divisions in football.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to another Crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints. We are your host, Travis Rogers from over at Locked On Rams, myself, Ross Jackson from over at Locked On Saints, bringing you your daily dose of the Los Angeles Rams and the New Orleans Saints every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's episode, we're going to bring you through everything each of these teams needs to do to get a win as they desperately try to cling to life and keep their quickly vanishing, but still present playoff hopes alive. We'll also dive into the New Orleans Saints needing another big performance out of their rookie offensive tackle in this one. And is this the last or amongst the last set of games that we see from Rams quarterback Matthew Stafford? We're going to break all of that down here on today's show. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer of Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks, who sponsor all of our Crossover Thursday content across the Locked On NFL channel. You can download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code Locked On NFL so you can win $50 instantly when you make your first $5 lineup. Travis, the Los Angeles Rams and the New Orleans Saints having kind of similar seasons. The Saints kind of did a little bit of a bell curve kind of a thing with theirs. The Rams kind of riding the roller coaster a bit. So what would you say is kind of the biggest story for the Rams right now coming into this matchup?
Fighting for their lives, fighting for their playoff lives, fighting for a reason to have games in December that actually means something other than draft position and whether or not it's the closing call for Matthew Stafford. They haven't been able to find a rhythm. They haven't been able to find an identity. They haven't been able to find really anything, Ross, that you could really hang your hat on and say, okay, we're good at this. They've had moments on defense. They've had moments on offense, but they haven't put anything together in any sort of consistent way. They've played 11 games this season, and I would argue they've played well once, maybe twice, and one of them was in a tough loss to Detroit. That was on, oh, by the way, opening night way back then. So that's been a minute. And they've just kind of been all over the map. They need to find something. The schedule has been kind of a weird one for them where they get a tough game like they had against Philadelphia, followed by what at least on paper is a manageable game against New Orleans, followed by Buffalo coming to town, followed by San Francisco after that. It's been and then the Jets. It's just good team, bad team, good team, bad team. They've never really been able to catch their footing. So this is one more chance to try to shock the world and beat Buffalo after that. But if they lose to the Saints on Sunday, that's it. That's a wrap. And then you start talking about very, very different things. The at the top of the list for me is Matthew Stafford and whether he's back or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this too. Is there a chance or is there a concern here that with the Buffalo Bills on the way, that this is one of those games that the Rams unfortunately look past and therefore come in a little bit kind of sluggish up against the Saints because they're looking ahead to that Buffalo Bills game? Or are they really concerned about trying to string together some wins here?
Yeah, I don't think they're good enough to look past anybody. That's not one of those, okay, oh, they caught us flat-footed. If they don't, even when they could throw their best punch, they could play their best game and still lose to the Saints. That's kind of the team that they are. They barely beat the Raiders, who are dreadful. They've had some moments along the way. They barely beat the Patriots, who are not a very good football team. So this is kind of where they are. So I'd be surprised if they came out and had a performance that feels like the classic trap game, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had a performance that they don't look very good because they might not be very good. I don't think they stink. I don't think they're good. It's a really weird deal. They've played 11 games, and I don't think they're good or bad. I think they're just the definition of mediocre so far this year.
Yeah, just an average football team. I get that. And when it comes to Matthew Stafford, I mean, you mentioned this could be kind of the swan song for him here this season. Everything. What's kind of led you to feeling that way when it comes to Stafford?
Well, one, he's still good, Ross, and he still can do some things to make you go, oh, there it is. Yeah. But he's not that all the time, and last year he had a run where he was the best player on the field more often than he wasn't.
Easily. Yeah.
And that has not been true this year. There's been flashes of it here and there. The deal to get him in this year got done at the 11th hour. There's some money things that are a part of it. The Rams, you really want a $50 million quarterback if you're going to win 7 games? I don't know if you do. You want a guy that's closing in on 40 years old. He may want to go somewhere else, and I'll put all these things together. That's one thing. But the biggest reason for me, nobody is saying he's coming back. Not him, not the team, not anybody. No one is talking beyond this year. And it's you can kind of read the tea leaves a little bit with his age, his money, with the team and where they are and their kind of arc to being competitive along the way. And it's really pointing to them kind of maybe having to hit a reset button at the end of the season with Stafford, potentially with Kupp. I know Kupp was on the trade block as we got closer to the deadline. So this team could look very different a year from now.
Yeah, it feels like they're a team that's undergone just a lot of swings, ebbs and flows throughout. I remember right before the trade deadline that where that Cooper Kupp conversation was happening, the Rams came out, they had a great performance, and everybody said, well, they're definitely not trading Cooper Kupp now because they're about to go on a run. Then it felt like they heated up, and then it's just kind of been up and down after that, I guess.
That's exactly right. When they beat Minnesota on a Thursday night, and it was one of those standalone games where everybody got to see it, and they're like, oh, the Rams, and it was the one time all year the Rams looked like the Rams. Matthew Stafford threw 4 touchdown passes. Cooper Kupp looked great. Puka Nacua came back. The offensive line was pretty functional. And it's like, okay, here we go. I remember saying it on Locked On Rams, and the everydayers will certainly remember this. I said, don't get fooled. That was a good game, but I don't know if they're a good team yet. So don't get fooled by that, because if you can get something, and not that it's an easy decision, Cooper Kupp's a legend. He's a Super Bowl MVP, all of those sorts of things. But if there is a market for him, and maybe you can, get a premium price for a player that might be past the premium performance, that's something you need to think about. My understanding is no one was really dying to overpay to get him, so it made the decision a little bit easier for him to stay. But I think there's a restructure. I think this team's going to be very, very different in 2025.
Yeah, I think we could say that same thing about both of these teams. I mean, the Saints have already dumped their head coach, right? They're working with an interim head coach who's got them playing incredibly well. Like, hats off to Darren Rizzi in terms of what he's been able to do so far. We'll discuss that in a little bit more here in a second. But yeah, I mean, these are two teams right now that are both going to look very, very different in 2025 and are kind of showing their last iterations of themselves here in 2024. Based on what it is that Matthew Stafford is doing well, is there something around the New Orleans Saints you feel he might be able to take advantage of? Or is this a situation where the Saints might be able to play themselves into some opportunistic chances here?
I think that it's the latter. The Rams have never been able to find one thing to lean on. I'll go back to the game that we saw most recently last Sunday night against the Eagles. Yeah. They got going a little bit early. Kyren Williams fumbles. They get their second drive of the game. They end up punching it in the end zone. Then they really don't look very good for the rest of the night after that. Their offensive line has been a real mess. They haven't had any sort of consistency. Hopefully, Rob Havenstein is back this week. He's missed the last 3 weeks. They've really missed him. Steve Avila, their left guard a year ago, who was terrific, has regressed. There's some injury concerns there. They're playing a 7th-round rookie at center instead of the guy that they signed as a free agent in Jonah Jackson. So they're trying some stuff, but nothing has really clicked. I think if there's an opportunity for the Rams, it's on the other side of the ball. If they can get the Saints into some situations where they have to throw the ball, that's where the Rams defense is pretty good. So if they can get a lead and they can kind of lean on a one-way go on the Saints offense and let Jared Verse go do his thing, let Braden Fisk do his thing, Byron Young, some others, that Rams defense can be pretty good. But Saints don't have a Saquon Barkley, and nobody other than Philly, maybe Baltimore has a running back like that. But the Rams have a really hard time stopping the run. So if they fall behind, look out.
Yeah, well, that's very true. The New Orleans Saints don't have a Saquon Barkley, but they do have a Taysom Hill, who, of course, had a huge game last week. And none of that, though, is going to matter without another stellar performance from the New Orleans Saints number 1 or round 1 rookie selection from this year's draft. We're going to break that down and much more. Look it over on the Saints side here as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition. It's Travis Rogers and I here on Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Saints and Locked On Rams is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook, and where you can go to tackle the rest of the NFL season, especially as a new customer, because right now, new customers can put $5 down on your first bet. And if you win that first bet, get $150 back in bonus bets. All you got to do is win that first $5 bet. So for instance, this weekend, the New Orleans Saints are home underdogs up against the Los Angeles Rams, 2.5 points. So whether you like the Rams to cover or you like the New Orleans Saints in the upset, there's that and much more, including odds, lines, and props all over the place that you can get in on. Live betting is available as well on the FanDuel app, where you can also track live stats, as well as check out the play-by-play, all in the same place where you place those bets as well. It doesn't get any better than FanDuel. So head over to FanDuel.com to join today. And don't forget, you'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunt and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making us a part of your day every day. Travis, we broke down, taking a look over at, well, we haven't broken down yet. Let's give ourselves some credit for our mental stability at the time we recorded this. Not yet. It's coming. But we took a look at everything, a couple of things over on the Rams side. I want to take a look at a couple of things over here on the Saints side as the Saints host the Rams coming to town. The Saints are on a 2-game win streak, but we've been here before. The Saints won 2 games to open up the season, and then Travis, they went on a 7-game losing streak after that. They got their head coach fired and their starting cornerback eventually traded at the trade deadline. So now they're riding on a 2-game winning streak after the interim head coach was appointed. That was head coach Darren Rizzi, with wins over the Atlanta Falcons and the Cleveland Browns. So teams, right? Number 1 in the division when it comes to Atlanta. But as we mentioned before, these are the 2 worst divisions in football by record. So
the AFC South may want a piece of that.
Yeah, that's right.
As long as they have the Texans, they probably win that argument.
It's not a race for who comes in first. It's simply a party that everyone's welcome to join. AFC South, NFC West, NFC South, everybody's just hanging out in their own little sad corner. So when it comes down to the Saints here, though, they're looking to see if they can get this 3-game win streak going up against a team that I'm sure that they will, see themselves as a team that they can come out and win against. This is a team that is not interested in mailing it in. This is still very much a team that's interested in competing. And they're going to be one of those teams that is going to look at themselves as in it until they're mathematically eliminated from it. And I think the thing that will keep them afloat, if they get the chance to stay afloat this week, is going to be another big performance by first-round rookie starting left tackle Taliese Fuaga. Taliese went up against Myles Garrett last week, matched up with him one-on-one. I counted about a little bit around a dozen times. Other times he had chips and help and stuff like that, but matched up a total of 30 times in pass protection, didn't allow a single pressure during that game. Now he faces a huge test and a guy that lines up over on his side about 67% of the time in Jared Verse, fellow first-round rookie. And so these 2 guys going at it, I think are A, it's going to be so much fun to watch, right? But then B, that could be the thing that changes this game, because as you've mentioned, the Rams do well against the pass, but it's not just about their coverage. It's about the relationship between their rush and coverage, because Jared Verse has been just an absolute demolition man so far already this season.
Yeah, he really has. He's the Rams, believe it or not, Ross, the Rams had not picked a player in the first round since Jared Goff. This was the first player they had taken in the first round since they drafted Jared Goff, #1 overall, way back in 2016. You'd almost forgotten what a first-round draft pick would look like in Los Angeles, really.
The only reason why I remember that, the only reason why I know that is because you haven't been able to participate in the first round in the Locked On mock drafts for years.
They kept 2 for Jalen Ramsey, 2 for Matthew Stafford. Right. They just keep sending them out, and it worked. And they went to a Super Bowl, and they went to another one and won it. So it certainly was good. But I think not only are you seeing a first round talent in Jared Verse, but you're seeing first round growing pains in Jared Verse. And I think one of the things that I'm curious to, you can kind of fill the Rams fans in on is, will they be able to take advantage of Verse the way some other teams have, to kind of snooker him in some situations and use his aggressiveness against him and get him a little too far inside to let some things go outside, maybe Taysom Hill, like you mentioned. But I'd just be curious, because when he just needs to go this way, he's amazing. But when he needs to kind of go this way and make sure that no one gets out this way, he can struggle a little bit, like a lot of first-year guys do. He's a terrific talent. I'm incredibly excited to watch him become what I think will be an all-pro player before it's done. But you can still use his inexperience against him at this point.
Yeah, Locked On Saints every day is will remember very much my love for Jared Verse throughout the draft cycle. I think if you look at what the Saints did in the opening drive up against Cleveland, first of all, the one thing that they did very well is that they used Taysom Hill in a bunch of different ways. He was a lead blocker, he was a receiver, he was a thrower, he was a rusher, and he was a blocker, all within the first 8-play drive, whatever it was. So they did a really good job just kind of forcing Cleveland's defense to respect all the different ways that they can use Taysom Hill, which is what makes him valuable, right? If he's on the field to be a rusher, but then they have to respect him as a passer, that ends up creating some conflict for those defenses. The other thing that you saw them do extremely well is that everything was designed to go away from Myles Garrett. You saw outside zone play action, bootlegs to the opposite side going away from Myles Garrett. You saw the halfback draw off of the orbit motion, and that halfback draw went to the right side of the center, opening up away from Myles Garrett. You saw Taysom Hill's 10-yard touchdown run on the read option keeper go to the opposite side of Myles Garrett. So they did a really good job kind of game planning and trying to make Myles Garrett work laterally as opposed to full head of steam. I think they'll do the same thing with Jared Verse. I do know that Braden Fisk will add a little bit of a level of complication for that, though, because he's been really disruptive in mucking up the middle of the defensive line.
He has. He believe it or not, with the sack he picked up with Jalen Hurts on Sunday night, he set a new Rams rookie record for most sacks through 11 games, which beat some guy named Aaron Donald who had the previous record. So he's off to and I think, and I'm not comparing anybody to Aaron Donald. I'm not that crazy. I may be dumb, but I'm not that dumb. But what they do.
This is the breakdown we were talking about. It's happening right now.
Exactly right. But they kind of, Aaron Donald drew so much attention that guys like Kobe Turner, guys like Byron Young were able to really go and put together some really impressive years. And while there's no Aaron Donald to, absorb all that attention, there are 4 really good guys up front. And so you can't really just, we'll run away from Verse or we'll run towards this player or that player. Byron Young's on the other side. Kobe Turner's in the middle. Bobby Brown has had a pretty good year for the Rams in the middle of that line as well. Now they got absolutely demolished by the Eagles on Sunday night, so they got to clean a lot of things up there. But, I think as far as the Saints go, if they can get a lead, that's when the Rams are in big trouble, because the Rams don't have a ton of explosive players on offense, and that defense really struggles against the run.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you'll watch New Orleans try to do in this game. It's what they did against Cleveland last week. They made their offense their best defense by going out there and getting that lead, forcing Cleveland to be one-dimensional. And in that situation, it's Jameis Winston. So you want him throwing the football as much as you can so you can try to take advantage of some of the mistakes. The Saints did not do that, however, so they'll need to do that in this game. Jameis actually almost threw for 400 yards in that matchup. He looks like he's having the time of his life in Cleveland right now, making Snow Angels having a great time. It's awesome. We love him. Over on the defensive side for New Orleans, I think the big thing that you're watching for in this one is going to be, can the New Orleans Saints defensive line take advantage of some of the kind of mismatching that you described over on the offensive line for the Rams? And can they get that pressure on Matthew Stafford and try to limit the run game? They did a good job limiting the run game last week, but a lot of that also had to do with carrying a big lead, right? So you want to see them be able to complement that. The thing that I like that the Saints have changed recently is that they used to substitute their defensive line like a hockey team. You'd see 4 guys run off and 4 more guys run on and all this stuff. And they do that, one package on first down, another package on second down, another package on third down. Now these guys are kind of playing 5-6 snaps with one unit, and then maybe a couple of guys will come off. Couple new guys will come on. They'll play 5 or 6 snaps together. So it keeps them fresh, but also allows them to get a rhythm. I think that that's something that could work to their advantage, especially if the Rams offensive line is struggling a little bit with its kind of mismatching.
Yeah, they've struggled to find any sort of consistency. You know, this season got off to such a similar start to the season after they won the Super Bowl, where they had some real big injuries on opening night. And you lost 2 starters before the season had really even gotten started. And now all of a sudden you've got rookies, you've got backups, you got backups to backups that, you know, their swing tackle, Joe Noteboom, he's been down for a while. So you've got a third string tackle playing at right tackle. There are a lot of vulnerabilities on that Rams offensive line. And, you know, Matthew Stafford is not going to make a bunch of plays with his feet. He's going to beat you with his brain. He's going to beat you with his arm. He's going to beat you by being very experienced and getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. But, you know, you got to have at least a little time. And when he doesn't, he's very human. And like we talked about at the beginning, I do think, and while I still think he's very good, and I hope he's back, I don't think he will be, but I hope he is, he's tipped over the top of that curve. Like this is one of these, he's taking a lot of shots and he's not looking to take any more, and he's getting rid of the ball, you know, when he needs to get rid of the ball. You don't get to hit him maybe as much as he was as a younger player, but that doesn't mean that the ball is being completed. So I am cautious. I'm very wary of what pressure may come from the Saints defense, because the Rams have not done a good job of protecting him for the majority of the season.
Yeah, going to be a big key in this game, protection for both of these quarterbacks. Coming up next, Travis and I are going to tell you the things that each of these teams needs to do to get a win. And unsurprisingly, I'm going to bet that the run game is going to be a big part of this upcoming conversation. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with our crossover Thursday, Locked on Rams and Locked on Saints, part of Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked on Rams and Locked on Saints brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the absolute best place to go, whether you're trying to plan for a big event moments in advance or months in advance. You're going to be able to find everything that you need over at FanDuel. And it's one of the few places where, as the event gets closer to starting, your tickets will get more and more affordable, and they'll even keep some deals going up to an hour after the event begins as well. You can curate all of it with Game Time picks so that you see all of the best deals for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Right now, the New Orleans Saints hosting the Los Angeles Rams. You can get deals up to $27, $28 up in the 600 section. Great viewing from that area of the Caesars Superdome. So go and check them out today over at Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You get $20 off of your first purchase. Once again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, y'all, it's Crossover Thursday here, Locked on Rams and Locked on Saints. Travis Rogers and Ross Jackson here breaking down this big matchup between the Los Angeles Rams traveling to the Big Easy to take on the New Orleans Saints this weekend. Now we're going to dive into the 3 things that each of these teams needs to do to get a win. Of course, our Crossover Thursdays are always presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. So, Travis, when it comes down to the things that the Rams need to do to get a win here in New Orleans, what do you think the game kind of starts off with for them? Like, what do they need to do to get a win?
This is the worst answer you're ever going to hear all season long. Here we are in week 13, and it's the dumbest, most obvious answer. What are the 3 things we talk about? Don't turn it over, block, and don't miss kicks.
I like the block edition.
I mean, it's just like this is not super complicated.
Right.
Kyren Williams has fumbled 5 times in the last 7 games. That can't can't continue.
That's big.
That's crazy. You know, that game against the Eagles got off to a weird start because he put it on the ground on their first series. They don't block anybody up front. That Matthew Stafford has very little time. And Josh Carty, who they spent a draft pick on and got off to a good start. I think Rams fans were pretty pleased. I know the everydayers were listening to Doug and I talk about him, the Carty party that was kind of being thrown at the early part of the season. And he was good. And it felt like he had some range out to maybe the low 50s that you felt pretty good. Well, that's not true anymore. He's missing more than he's making. So, call me a football genius. Don't turn it over, block, and make kicks. It's a pretty good formula to win a game.
It's got to be a big part of it, right? I mean, gosh, that's about it. That's about all it takes. All right, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. No, look, and I think look, the Saints kind of path to winning is pretty simple as well. They got to be able to run the ball effectively. They've got to be able to get pressure on the opposing quarterback while keeping their quarterback clean, and they have to continue to win in the special teams battle. I think special teams. I'm glad that you brought up kicking. I think special teams is going to be big in this game. I don't know if you've seen. But there's some voodoo going on in the Superdome right now, Travis. There's 2 weeks ago, Younghoe Koo missed 3 kicks in the Superdome for the first time in his career. First time he ever missed 3 kicks in a game. And then last week, Dustin Hopkins missed another 3 kicks. 2 of them on the same drive, because one of them he missed the field goal. It got called for defensive holding on a field goal, which I'll never understand. First time I've ever seen that. But yeah, right. So then they got another couple of plays at the end of the half. And then in the greatest ball don't lie movement, Dustin Hopkins lines up for a shorter kick and misses the opposite direction. So it's been insane here. Meanwhile, Blake Corum, the New Orleans Saints kicker, has been great here as of late. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, but I think we've all said it anyway. But whatever special teams coordinator now turned interim head coach Darren Rizzi is doing, whatever gree he buried somewhere on the Superdome grounds, it's working against opposing kickers. Yeah,
the Rams are hanging on by the skin of their teeth with their special teams, because look, they brought back Chase Blackburn as their special teams coach, and I think everybody went, say what now? That he came back for another year, because they had the worst special teams in football last year. And rarely does worst special teams in football and playoff team go hand in hand. And somehow, some way, they still made the playoffs despite having some really dreadful special teams performances. They kind of ran it back. They changed out some personnel. It's better, but it's not a lot better. So maybe that voodoo that you're talking about, that the Rams are kicking so squirrely right now, maybe it'll drive it through the uprights, because everybody's talking, they got to make these goalposts a little closer. It's getting too easy for these guys. Like, watch a Rams game. No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, it's not easier for them.
I love that from the moment that suggestion became a hotly debated conversation, NFL kickers just completely did themselves in, have done themselves in week over week. Yeah, right. Yeah. They said, watch this. You think we need these skinnier? Give me a second. And they have been awful so far throughout the season, almost bad as the officiating. The other things that I think that we won't go there. It's all right. Wait. I will say this. This real quick. There's no reason that Nick Sirianni should have been able to change his mind after accepting that penalty. I've never seen that before.
I assumed, and apparently it isn't, I assumed there was a rule that once I say I want to do A, I don't get a look at the other guy's cards and then say, I changed my mind, I'd like to do B. I've never seen that happen. And
that was wild.
And again, that's not why the Rams lost the game. They lost the game because Saquon Barkley is superhuman. But
I mean, 302 total yards. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Yeah, for anybody that maybe that didn't see it, there was I think it was a 3rd and 3 that ended up, there was a holding penalty on an incomplete pass, if I recall correctly. And Nick Sirianni declined the holding penalty, saw Sean McVay send the Rams offense back out to go for it on 4th and 3, and then said, never mind. And then accepted the penalty, and they allowed him to accept the penalty.
That's exactly right. And there's one other wrinkle to this that I feel necessary, because I've been thinking about it for days, and I can't quite come up with it. Why would he have thought they were going to kick it the first time? They were down 13 points. It's late in the fourth quarter. Like, what did you think they were going to do? That's the part that's like, and look, Eagles are good. Them and the Lions have kind of separated from the pack. But if I were an Eagles fan and saw that, I'm going, what is going through that dude's head? Like, there's no scenario in the world where the Rams were going to kick that field goal.
Nick Sirianni is presently the worst NFL coach of a winning team right now. I have no doubt in my mind. Anyway, sorry. This is not an Eagles podcast. If you want that, you can go check out Gino and Louie over at Locked On Eagles. They've got you taken care of. Yeah. Travis and I are we're just bonkers about football. But I think the other thing here is that, like, the Saints have got to run the football well, and I'm sure that goes just as important for the Los Angeles Rams as well. The Saints have been a weak run defense. The Rams have allowed over 151 rushing yards per game in away games and are coming off of the game where Saquon Barkley just went nuts in SoFi and everything. So the Saints have to be able to try to take advantage of that as well. I do want to mention that, of course, is a huge part of this game, I'm sure, for both sides.
Yeah, for sure. I've been, and maybe if the Rams lose this game to the Saints, we'll get to see something that I've been calling for I don't want to say a few weeks, maybe a few months. Why do we draft Blake Corum in the third round, never to use him? He really hasn't played much at all. Kyren Williams keeps fumbling. The Rams, it's not like Kyren Williams is a fumbler who also will rip off a bunch of 20 and 30-yard runs. That's not the sort of back he is. He's kind of a grinded out sort of guy. And I don't think he's a bad player, but he's not an explosive player. Let's take a look at the other guy. Maybe it's the same and without the fumbles, and that would feel, I get it. There's pass pro and Matthew Stafford is all of those things, but the clock on Blake Corum has been ticking for a minute for me. I'd really like to see him play more.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a great acceleration on one of the runs that I saw from him on Sunday night up against the Eagles and things like that.
That was his only one.
I was like, why don't they give him the ball to this guy a little bit more?
They haven't all
see the juice. You can see the juice.
They haven't used him.
We'll see. We'll see if maybe he gets involved here up against New Orleans. And of course, the Saints themselves over on their side will have Alvin Kamara, of course, to be able to lean on as well, who is on track for his first 1,000-yard rushing season, which feels so weird to say. He's never had one. Isn't that crazy?
I've never gotten that big wrong. Wrong. Yeah.
I never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. But staring down at it now here in year, almost 7, 8 at this point. So good for him. Good for him because he deserves it. He deserves it. All right, y'all. Wonderful, wonderful game upcoming that will pale in comparison to this crossover. There's no doubt about that. I think I can say that Travis and I killed this, and we had a great time doing it. Perfectly happy. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you go check out Travis and Doug McCain over at Locked On Rams for more on the Rams. They'll have additional episodes getting you ready for this game. You can come over to Locked On Saints, check out what we've got coming on as well, getting you ready for this matchup. So for my good friend Travis Rogers, I am Ross Jackson. We'll see you here again soon for another episode of Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.